We have an assortment of objects now, so it's time to use them to design our town further and give it some personality. So go into your main game room. That's rm_game main. I have mine open here at the top in a tab, but if you don't, you can always find it in the asset browser under Rooms. Make sure the Instances layer is selected, and in your asset browser, let's go to that environment group, and we can see all those new objects that we made. So you can do whatever you want here, including moving these barrels around and dragging in new objects, but we have a couple of recommendations. First, let's only put one fountain in the room. This will make a bit more sense later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag that in. And in my case, I'll just put it right there. Second, you need 3 storefronts. At least we recommend this, because this is where our characters later are going to stand in front of. So I'm going to drag in 3. Maybe I'll put one right up here. Maybe I'll move these barrels out of the way. And I'll put one store right here. You know what? Maybe let's put that one right there instead. And I'm actually going to move my player object right here to the middle, and I'm going to drag another instance of the store object and put that one right there. If you drag in something you don't mean to, or you want to remove something, you can always just click on an object and hit delete, and you can always undo that. But go ahead and drag in as many bushes, barrels, fences, rocks, trees as you want, and just make your town look cool. So here's how my town is looking so far. I've put in fences around some of the paths, some bushes in clever places. I've got those barrels in there, and I've added a few more. These look a little weird right now, and I'll explain those in a moment. I put trees everywhere, and in some cases I put rocks around the base of trees, or even some other bushes. And I've added trees around the edges and sort of at the bottom of the screen, just to add a nice little soft edge. In fact, let's put one right down there. It's okay if it goes outside of the bounds, it just means you won't see the rest of the tree. And I've added in some extra little details just around to give it some depth. Now, one thing to note is that you can actually edit objects once they've been placed into a room. Now, if I say double click on this rock, I'm going to get a bunch of instance options. One of these here says flip X, and the other one says flip Y. If I just check those, you'll see what happens. You can actually flip the X and Y axis of this. So you can change the orientation of any instance in a room, and it doesn't affect the original object, just this particular instance. You can also adjust the scale. Notice one thing really important. When the rock is as it's supposed to be, its X scale is 1, and its Y scale is 1. So it's 100% of its intended size on both the X and Y axis. But if I flip the X, notice what happens to the X scale. It actually becomes -1. You're going to see this happen as we go throughout the rest of this course. If a sprite is flipped horizontally, it will have a negative X scale. The same is true if it's flipped vertically. Just something to keep in mind. Now you can change the scale, and you can also rotate this if you want, or scale it up or down. But I don't recommend you doing this because you're going to get some very weird looking objects. However, you know what? It's your town. Do whatever you like. But if you want some variety, I recommend clicking flip X on several objects just to make them look a little different. This way we get a tree that faces the other way. Maybe a bush that's not the same as the other bush. You can hide that edge right there. And that'll let you have some fun and reuse a lot of your objects in clever ways. You could even flip one of the stores, in fact, if you really wanted to. Now, where it's flipping is based on the origin point that we set in the sprite editor. So if your origin point was way up here in the left corner, then it would sort of just flop over to the left. So having that nice and centered is really important. And you know what? With that flipped, let's just move that barrel, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So once you've gone through your objects and added a bit of variety by flipping them or moving them around or even scaling them, let's move on. With your town design, you may realize that you want to adjust the tiles that we placed before. If this is the case, you can always click on your tile's main layer and go over onto the right and click on your Room Editor tab again. You can always drag this out if you need to. And don't forget you have these tools here that let you zoom in and out of your tile set. You can also hold the spacebar to pan around, and just like before, you can see that you can stamp tiles. You can right-click to remove them, or choose another tile or group of tiles in your tile set here to redesign your town. You'll also notice one more thing. If I go over here to these barrels, they don't quite look right. It almost looks like they're stacked on top of each other. They don't seem to be in the right order, and they're kind of butting out in front of the store, which is not what we want. If I click on this topmost barrel, remember you'll get a list of every single instance that's in your room over here on the left. Now, these barrels look like this because of the order in which I placed them. However, remember that a barrel object is a child of the obj_par environment object, and we've already written that depth sorting code. So we don't actually need to worry about this. It may look weird in the editor, but if we run our game, you'll see that everything behaves correctly. So let's run our game now and walk around our newly designed town. We've got our animated fountain, we've got our bushes that are flipped, we've got those rocks that have been flipped, and you can see that we can correctly walk in front of and behind all of our various objects. Now, if something is behaving oddly, you might need to go back into the sprite for that object and make sure that its collision mask has been set correctly. Here we've got our fences all nicely lined up, the trees at the bottom. And if you go over to where those barrels are, you'll see that they make way more sense now. I might adjust that one at the bottom, but you get the idea. Once you're done running around your newly designed town, go ahead and close the game window and return to GameMaker Studio 2.